My brother's wife screamed, "Pay your rent or get out." And I left. She didn't know I owned the house. I secretly sold it for $840,000. When they started evicting her and my brother, she called me in a panic, but my response stunned her. The alarm clock didn't need to wake me anymore. Hell, I'd been getting up at 6 on the dot for so long that my body just knew when it was time. 72 years on this earth, and some habits die harder than others. The discipline never left me, even after retirement, even after Teresa passed, even after I ended up in what everyone thought was my little brother's guest room. I'd swing my legs over the side of that narrow bed, the one with the squeaky springs that Clarissa never bothered to replace, and sit there for a moment, listening to the house wake up around me. Miles would be shuffling around in the master bedroom, probably checking his phone for work emails before his feet even hit the floor. That's the kind of guy my kid brother had become over the years. Always hustling, always stressed, always looking like he had the weight of the world on his shoulders. But the real weight in this house, that was Clarissa. She ran this place like some kind of boot camp commandant, and every morning at exactly 6:15, I'd hear her heels clicking down the hardwood hallway toward my door. Click, 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 like a countdown to another day of walking on eggshells. The knock would come, 3 sharp raps, nothing friendly about it. Morning check, she'd call it, though we both knew what it really was. She wanted to make sure the old man was still kicking, still breathing, still able to contribute his monthly rent to their household budget. Not out of any genuine concern for my well-being, mind you. More like a landlord making sure their tenant hadn't croaked overnight and left them with a mess to clean up. "I'm up, Clarissa." I'd call back through the door, same routine every damn day. Sometimes I'd hear her pause out there, like she was hoping for something different. Maybe hoping I'd sound weaker, more dependent. But I wasn't about to give her that satisfaction. See, here's the thing that made this whole charade so rich, and I mean that literally. This house, this beautiful 3-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and the oak trees that I'd watch grow taller every year, I bought it. With my own money. 17 years ago, to be exact. The lottery ticket was a fluke, one of those scratch-offs you buy at the gas station when you're feeling lucky. $5 million after taxes. Not the kind of money that makes headlines, but enough to change everything if you're smart about it. And I was smart about it, all right. Smart enough to keep my mouth shut. I never told Teresa. God rest her soul. She would have wanted to help every charity in the county, buy new cars for the grandkids, maybe take one of those fancy cruises she always talked about. But I'd seen what sudden money could do to families. Seen it tear people apart faster than you could cash the check. So I kept it quiet, invested most of it, and used just enough to buy this house under an LLC that nobody could trace back to me. When Miles and Clarissa were struggling a few years back, in between jobs, her part-time gig at the bank barely covering groceries, I made them an offer. "Let me rent the guest room," I'd said. "Help out with some bills." They thought they were doing me the favor, giving the old widower a place to land. Little did they know, I was basically paying them to live in my own house. The irony was almost funny. Almost. If it wasn't so damn insulting every single day. Miles used to be different, you know. When we were kids, he was the one who'd sneak me extra cookies when Mom wasn't looking. He'd help me with my homework, teach me how to throw a curveball in the backyard. But somewhere along the way, life had beaten that kindness out of him. Maybe it was the mortgage stress, maybe it was Clarissa's influence, or maybe he just forgot that family was supposed to mean something more than a monthly check. These days, our conversations were about as warm as a January morning. "Morning," he'd grunt if we passed in the hallway. "Bills are due on the 1st, if I was lucky enough to get a full sentence." He treated me like a tenant, not like the big brother who used to read him bedtime stories when our parents worked late shifts. But the worst part? The absolute worst part was watching him let Clarissa call the shots. Every decision about the house, about rules, about what I could and couldn't do, it all went through her. Miles would just nod along, like he'd forgotten he had a backbone somewhere along the way. The only bright spot in that whole house was Talia, 20 years old, studying business at the community college, and still had enough heart to treat me like a human being instead of a piece of furniture that paid rent. She'd knock on my door just to chat, ask about my day, tell me about her classes. Sometimes she'd even bring me real food. None of that low-sodium, low-flavor garbage her mother insisted was good for me. "Grandpa Joe," she'd say, even though I wasn't technically her grandfather. You seem different from other old people. Like you've got secrets or something. If only she knew how right she was. Every night, lying in that squeaky bed, staring at the ceiling I technically owned, I'd think about telling them the truth. About pulling out the deed, showing them the bank statements, watching their faces when they realized they'd been treating the homeowner like a freeloader. But something always stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was curiosity about how far they'd push it. Turns out, I wouldn't have to wait much longer to find out. After that morning ritual of proving I was still among the living, I'd shuffle down to the kitchen where Clarissa ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a dish rag. The woman had turned breakfast into some kind of military operation, complete with schedules, portions, and rules that seemed designed to suck every ounce of joy out of the most important meal of the day. The kitchen itself was beautiful. I should know, since I'd picked out every damn appliance when I bought the place. Granite countertops, stainless steel everything. One of those fancy islands with bar stools that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But under Clarissa's reign, it felt more like a cafeteria in some cut-rate nursing home than the heart of a family home. "Good morning, Joe," she'd say without looking up from whatever she was rationing out on the counter. Always Joe, never anything warmer. Not Uncle Joe, like Talia called me, not even Joe Bob, like Teresa used to say when she was feeling playful. Just flat, cold Joe, like I was some stranger she barely tolerated. And there it would be, waiting for me at my designated spot at the breakfast table, a bowl of oatmeal that had been sitting there long enough to develop a skin on top, alongside exactly half of a banana. Not a whole banana, mind you. Half, cut with surgical precision and arranged on a paper napkin like it was some kind of gourmet presentation. "For your cholesterol," she'd announce, like she was my personal physician instead of a part-time bank teller who'd probably failed high school biology. "Doctor says men your age need to watch their numbers." What a load of bull. My cholesterol was fine. Hell, my last physical showed numbers that would make a 40-year-old jealous. But arguing with Clarissa was like trying to teach calculus to a brick wall. She'd made up her mind about what was good for me, and that was that. The real kicker? I knew exactly why breakfast was cold oatmeal and half a banana. It wasn't about my health, it was about her wallet. A giant container of generic oats from the discount grocery store probably cost her $3 and would last a month. Bananas were cheap year-round. Meanwhile, Miles was probably upstairs eating Eggs Benedict or some fancy cereal that actually had flavor. But I'd sit there like a good little tenant and choke down that flavorless mush, watching Clarissa bustle around the kitchen like she was running the Pentagon instead of making breakfast for 3 people. Everything had to be organized her way. Coffee mugs in perfect rows, dish towels folded into precise squares, even the salt and pepper shakers positioned at exact angles. Miles would eventually wander down, usually around 7:15, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. My little brother had changed so much over the years that sometimes I barely recognized him. Gone was the kid who used to sneak extra dessert when mom wasn't looking, replaced by this hollow-eyed man who acted like showing basic human kindness might bankrupt him. "Morning," he'd mumble, not making eye contact with either of us. Then he'd grab one of those expensive protein bars from the pantry, the kind that cost more per ounce than steak, and wash it down with coffee made from beans that probably cost more than my entire breakfast. The contrast wasn't lost on me. There I was, eating prison food while my landlord enjoyed the good stuff. In my own house, with my money paying for both meals. "Don't forget," Clarissa would say to Miles while completely ignoring me. "We need to talk about the utility bills tonight. They've gone up again." She'd shoot me a look that said more than words ever could, like my existence was personally responsible for their financial struggles. The funny thing was, I was paying those utility bills. Had been for years, through a complicated setup with my bank that made it look like the payments were coming from their account. But they didn't know that. As far as they were concerned, they were covering electricity, gas, water, and internet for a freeloading old man who couldn't even be trusted with a decent breakfast. Miles would just nod and grab his briefcase, probably counting the minutes until he could escape to his office where he didn't have to pretend to be a caring family member. "See you tonight," he'd say to Clarissa, completely skipping over any acknowledgement that I existed. And then there was Talia, bless her heart. She'd usually come bouncing down the stairs around 7:30, full of energy and actually happy to see people. "Morning, Mom." "Morning, Grandpa Joe," she'd call out, grabbing an apple or a piece of toast. Real food, not the slop her mother served me. Sometimes she'd look at my bowl with confusion. "Is that all you're eating?" she'd ask. "That doesn't look like enough food for a bird." "It's what the doctor ordered," I'd say, winking at her while Clarissa bristled behind the counter. Talia was smart enough to see through the bullshit, but she was also smart enough not to start a fight in her mother's kitchen. Those few minutes with Talia were the only thing that made breakfast bearable. She'd tell me about her classes, her friends, her dreams of maybe starting her own business someday. Real conversation, the kind that reminded me what family was supposed to feel like. But then she'd rush off to school, and I'd be left alone with my cold oatmeal and the crushing weight of pretending to be grateful for scraps in my own home. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when Clarissa decided to drop the bomb that would change everything. I was sitting in the living room, my living room, though she didn't know that, reading the newspaper and minding my own business when she marched in with that look on her face. You know the one I'm talking about. The same expression a cat gets right before it pounces on a mouse. "Joe, we need to talk," she announced, plopping herself down on the couch across from me like she was about to deliver a lecture to a misbehaving teenager. Miles was nowhere to be found, probably hiding upstairs or working late to avoid whatever confrontation his wife had cooked up this time. I folded my newspaper carefully, took off my reading glasses, and gave her my full attention. "What's on your mind, Clarissa?" "It's about the rent situation," she said, diving right in without any of the usual small talk. "Things have gotten more expensive around here. Utilities are through the roof, groceries cost twice what they used to, and don't even get me started on property taxes." Property taxes. If she only knew who was actually paying those, she might have choked on her own words. "I see," I said, keeping my voice level. And we're going to need you to contribute more to the household expenses. Starting next month, we'll need an additional $400 on top of what you're already paying. $400. On top of the $1,900 I was already giving them every month for the privilege of living in one room of my own house. I did the math in my head, $2,300 a month for a guest bedroom and the right to eat cold oatmeal in my own kitchen. Hell, I could have rented a decent apartment across town for half that amount. "That's quite an increase," I said, still maintaining my composure even though my blood pressure was probably spiking like a rocket. "Mind explaining where these extra costs are coming from?" Clarissa had clearly prepared for this question. She pulled out a folder, actually had the nerve to bring props to this shakedown, and started rattling off numbers like she was presenting a quarterly report to the board of directors. "Well, the electric bill has gone up $60 a month since summer ended. Gas is up another $40. The water bill increased because of that leak in the upstairs bathroom. You know, the one near your room." She gave me a pointed look, like somehow I was responsible for the plumbing in a house I'd owned for 17 years. "Insurance premiums went up after that storm last spring," she continued, flipping through her papers with theatrical precision. "And Miles thinks we should start putting more money aside for maintenance and repairs. This house is getting older, you know." "Getting older?" Yeah, it was getting older and more valuable every year, which I knew because I kept track of the property values in the neighborhood. But I wasn't about to share that little tidbit with Clarissa. $400 seems steep," I said, leaning back in my chair. "Maybe we could start smaller, work our way up to that amount over a few months?" Her face hardened like concrete setting in the sun. "Joe, I'm not negotiating here. This isn't a discussion, it's a notification. The new amount is due on the 1st of November, just like always." That's when Miles finally made his grand entrance, slinking into the room like a guilty dog who'd been caught digging in the trash. He wouldn't look me in the eye, just stood there behind his wife's chair like some kind of backup singer who'd forgotten the words to the song. "Miles," I said, trying to appeal to whatever was left of the brother I used to know, "you think an extra $400 a month is reasonable?" He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, cleared his throat, and gave me the most pathetic shrug I'd ever seen. "Well, Joe, costs are going up everywhere. We're all feeling the squeeze these days. We're all feeling the squeeze." Coming from a man who was driving a brand new SUV while I took the bus to my doctor's appointments because I didn't want to ask for rides and deal with Clarissa's sighing and eye-rolling. "And if I can't swing the extra money?" I asked, already knowing what was coming but wanting to hear them say it out loud. Clarissa's smile was about as warm as a January morning in Minnesota. "Then we'll have to explore other living arrangements for you." I'm sure there are plenty of nice senior communities around here that would love to have you. Senior communities. She was talking about those warehouse operations where they pack old folks together like sardines and charge them twice what I was paying to live here. Places where the food makes cold oatmeal look like a five-star meal and the staff treats residents like inventory instead of human beings. I need some time to think about this, I said, standing up from my chair with as much dignity as I could muster. Of course, Clarissa replied, but her tone suggested that my thinking time was limited. Just remember, the 1st of November is only 2 weeks away. 2 weeks to come up with an extra $400 or get kicked out of my own house by people who thought they were doing me a favor by letting me stay. The irony was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. As I walked back to my room in my house, I could hear them whispering in the living room, probably congratulating themselves on handling the situation so professionally, maybe even patting themselves on the back for being patient with the old man for so long. That night, lying in bed and staring at the ceiling, I made my decision. Enough was enough. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. No more second-guessing. No more wondering if I was being too sensitive or stubborn. Clarissa had drawn her line in the sand, and now I was going to draw mine, right across the deed to this house. I waited until I heard Miles' car pull out of the driveway at exactly 8:15, same as every weekday for the past 3 years. Clarissa left 20 minutes later in her little Honda, off to her part-time gig at First National, where she probably spent half her day gossiping about customers' financial situations. The house settled into that familiar quiet that comes when you're finally alone with your thoughts and your decisions. Talia had already left for her morning classes, which was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I wouldn't have to explain myself to the one person in this house who still treated me like family. A curse because saying goodbye to her was going to be the hardest part of this whole mess. I pulled out the old leather suitcase I'd bought for my honeymoon with Teresa 48 years ago, still in decent shape, though the corners were worn smooth and one of the zippers stuck a little. Packing didn't take long. When you've been living like a guest in your own home, you don't accumulate much stuff. A week's worth of clothes, my medications, a few books, the photo of Teresa from our anniversary dinner, and the small wooden box where I kept my important papers. That box held more secrets than Clarissa could have imagined in her wildest dreams. The real deed to the house, showing me as the sole owner. Bank statements from accounts she didn't know existed. The original lottery ticket stub, laminated and kept as a reminder of the day my life changed forever. And most importantly, the business cards for Raymond Mitchell, the sharpest real estate attorney in the county and the only person besides me who knew the truth about who really owned this place. As I folded my shirts and packed my razor, I kept thinking about Talia. That girl was the only good thing to come out of this whole arrangement. Smart as a whip, kind as her grandmother used to be, and ambitious enough to make something real of herself if she got the right opportunities. She deserved better than watching her parents nickel and dime an old man they thought was living off their charity. Around noon, I heard her key in the front door. Tuesday was her short day, just 2 classes, and then home for lunch before her evening shift at the campus bookstore. I was zipping up my second suitcase when she knocked on my door. "Grandpa Joe, you in there? Come on in, sweetheart." The look on her face when she saw those suitcases sitting on my bed was like watching someone's heart break in real time. "What's going on? Are you leaving?" I sat down on the edge of the bed and patted the spot. Next to me. She came over and plopped down, her eyes already getting watery. This kid had more genuine emotion in her pinky finger than her parents had in their entire bodies combined. "Your mom and I had a conversation last night about rent." I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "She wants me to pay more money, and I've decided it's time for me to find my own place." "But where will you go? And why didn't you tell me you were thinking about this?" She was getting worked up now, the way young people do when the adults in their lives make decisions that affect them without asking for input. "I found a nice little apartment across town," I said, which wasn't entirely true yet, but would be soon enough. "1 bedroom, quiet neighborhood, closer to the bus line. It'll be good for me to have my own space again." Talia wasn't buying it. She was too smart for that. "This is about Mom asking for more money, isn't it?" "God, I heard you guys talking last night. $400 is ridiculous, Grandpa Joe. You're already paying way too much for that tiny room. If only she knew how right she was. Sometimes things just run their course, I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. Your parents need their space, and I need mine. It's nobody's fault, just how life works sometimes. She leaned against me, and I could feel her trying not to cry. But your family. You shouldn't have to pay rent to live with family. And you definitely shouldn't have to leave because mom's being greedy. Smart girl. She saw right through her mother's bullshit, even if she didn't know the whole story. I want you to promise me something, I said, turning to look her in the eye. Don't let this change who you are. You've got something special, Talia. You treat people with kindness and respect, and that's rarer than you might think. Don't let your parents' mistakes make you cynical. What's that supposed to mean? It means keep being you. Keep working hard in school. Keep dreaming big. And don't let anyone convince you that money is more important than treating people right. We sat there for a few more minutes, her head on my shoulder, both of us knowing this was the end of something that had been good despite everything else that was rotten in this house. After she left for work, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Raymond Mitchell. Raymond, it's Joe. I need to see you today if possible. It's time. Time for what, Joe? Time to sell the house. The silence on the other end of the line stretched out long enough that I thought we might have been disconnected. Finally, Raymond cleared his throat. You sure about this? We've talked about it before, but you always changed your mind. I'm sure. They want to charge me $2,300 a month to live in my own guest room. I'm done playing games. Jesus Christ, Joe. $2,300? For 1 room. Plus they want me out if I can't pay it. So let's give them what they're asking for, just not the way they expected. The second call was to a moving company. I need a truck this afternoon. Just a few pieces, shouldn't take more than an hour. By 4 o'clock, my stuff was loaded and I was sitting in Raymond's office, signing papers that would put this house on the market faster than Clarissa could say eviction notice. We'll start showings tomorrow, Raymond said, grinning like he'd been waiting years for this moment. I've got 3 agents who've been chomping at the bit to list this property. Prime location, excellent condition, gonna sell fast. Just make sure the showings happen during work hours, I said. I want this to be a surprise. 2 weeks. That's all it took for my entire world, and theirs, to flip upside down. Raymond wasn't kidding when he said the house would sell fast. Hell, I don't think either of us expected it to move quite this quickly, but apparently prime real estate in a good neighborhood with mature trees and updated everything sells itself. My new apartment was small but perfect. A 1-bedroom place in a quiet complex about 15 minutes across town. Nothing fancy, but it had everything I needed. A kitchenette where I could make my own breakfast, a living room with a decent view of the courtyard, and most importantly, nobody telling me what I could or couldn't do. For the first time in years, I could breathe without wondering if someone was going to knock on my door to complain about something. I'd been settling into my new routine. Real coffee in the morning, eggs if I wanted them. Toast that wasn't rationed like we were living through the Great Depression, when Raymond called with news that made my day. Joe, you sitting down? Should I be? We got an offer. Cash offer. $840,000. I nearly dropped the phone. The house had been listed at $790, and here someone was offering $50,000 over asking price. No financing contingencies, no inspection drama, just straight cash. In this market, that was like winning the lottery all over again. Who's the buyer? I asked, though honestly I didn't much care. Could have been aliens from Mars for all it mattered to me. Young couple, both doctors. They're relocating from Chicago, need to close fast because they start at the hospital next month. They saw the virtual tour yesterday and want to put in the offer sight unseen. Their agent says they're serious buyers, already pre-approved and everything. $840,000. After the realtor fees and closing costs, I'd still walk away with more money than most people see in a lifetime. But the real kicker wasn't the money. It was what came next. There's one thing, though, Raymond continued, and I could hear the grin in his voice. They want a quick closing, 30 days max, and they're requesting that the current occupants vacate immediately upon closing. No grace period, no lease agreements, nothing. They want to move in the day they get the keys. Sounds perfect to me, I said, though my heart was starting to pound with anticipation. Accept the offer. You sure? We could probably negotiate. Raymond, accept the damn offer. Today, that afternoon, while I was sitting in my new living room reading a book I'd actually chosen myself instead of whatever was lying around Clarissa's house, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Miles' number, but when I answered, it was Clarissa's voice on the other end, and she sounded like someone had just told her the world was ending. Joe? Joe, what the hell is going on? We got some kind of legal notice today about the house being sold. I took a deep breath and settled back into my comfortable chair. My chair, in my apartment, where nobody could charge me extra for breathing. What kind of notice, Clarissa? It says we have 30 days to vacate the premises. It says the house has been sold to some people named Patterson, and we have to be out by November 15th. This has to be some kind of mistake. Doesn't sound like a mistake to me. What do you mean it doesn't sound like a mistake? Joe, this is serious. They're trying to kick us out of our own house. That's when I dropped the bomb that had been 17 years in the making. I sold the house, Clarissa. The silence on the other end of the line was so complete, I thought she might have passed out. I could practically hear the gears grinding in her head as she tried to process what I'd just said. What? What do you mean you sold the house? What house? Joe, what are you talking about? Your house. The house you've been charging me rent to live in. The house where you decided I needed to pay an extra $400 a month or get out. I sold it. That's impossible. You don't own a house. Miles owns this house. We've been living here for 3 years. Check the deed, Clarissa. Check the property records. Check whatever you want to check. I bought that house 17 years ago, and as of yesterday afternoon, I sold it to a nice young couple from Chicago for $840,000 cash. I could hear her breathing getting faster, more panicked. But how? When? Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't I tell you? I started to laugh, and once I started, I couldn't stop. Clarissa, you spent 3 years treating me like a freeloader. You charged me $1,900 a month to live in my own guest room. You fed me cold oatmeal and half a banana while your family ate real food. You wanted to kick me out if I couldn't pay you even more money. And you're asking me why I didn't tell you. Miles, I could hear her screaming in the background. Miles, get down here right now. We have a problem. The buyers take possession on November 15th. I continued, my voice steady as a rock. That gives you exactly 30 days to find somewhere else to live. I'd suggest you start looking soon. Good rental properties go fast in this market. You can't do this to us. We're family. Family. I let that word hang in the air for a moment. Clarissa, you treated me like a tenant. Now you can go be someone else's tenant. See how you like paying rent to people who don't give a damn about your comfort. She hung up on me, but not before I heard Miles' voice in the background asking what was wrong. I set my phone down on my coffee table and looked around my little apartment. Quiet. Peaceful. Mine. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. The silence stretched on so long I started to wonder if Clarissa had fainted or just hung up on me. But then I heard her breathing, sharp, ragged little gasps like she was hyperventilating. When she finally found her voice again, it came out as a whisper that gradually built into a full-blown shriek. That's impossible, she said, her voice cracking on every syllable. You're lying. You're a bitter old man who's trying to get back at us for asking you to pay your fair share. Check the county records, Clarissa. Look up the deed. Joseph Michael Brennan, sole owner since October 2008. Bought and paid for with cash. I could hear her fumbling around, probably looking for a pen or something to write with. In the background, I caught the sound of papers rustling and what might have been a chair falling over. This doesn't make sense, she continued, her voice getting higher and more frantic by the second. If you own the house, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us think Miles inherited it from your parents? Why did you pay rent? Because I wanted to see what kind of people you really were, I said, settling back in my recliner and putting my feet up. Turns out, you're exactly the kind of people who would charge an old man rent to live in his own house. That's when the real fireworks started. Clarissa unleashed a string of profanity that would have made a sailor blush, calling me everything from a manipulative bastard to a senile old fool who didn't deserve to have family. She accused me of lying, cheating, stealing, though she couldn't quite explain what I'd stolen since it was my own damn house. You conniving piece of shit, she screamed. Do you have any idea what you've done to us? We've got nowhere to go. Tali is in the middle of her semester. Miles just started a new project at work, and you're throwing us out on the street like we're nothing. I'm not throwing you anywhere, I replied calmly. The new owners are. I just sold them the house. What you do next is your business, not mine. But we're family. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Family. After 3 years of cold oatmeal, condescending lectures about my cholesterol, and being treated like a charity case who should be grateful for a roof over his head. Family doesn't charge each other rent, I said. Family doesn't threaten to kick each other out for not paying enough money. Family doesn't treat each other like a burden. She started crying then, big, ugly sobs that might have tugged at my heartstrings if I hadn't spent the last 3 years watching her count every penny I contributed to her household like I was some kind of deadbeat tenant. Please, she begged between sobs. Please don't do this to us. We can work something out. We can lower your rent, or maybe you don't have to pay anything at all. We'll treat you better, I promise. Too little, too late. Way too late. The papers are already signed, Clarissa. The deal is done. She hung up on me then, but my phone started ringing again within 5 minutes. This time it was Miles, and his approach was completely different from his wife's hysterics. Joe, he said, his voice flat and tired. We need to talk. I figured we might. Can I come over? I think this conversation needs to happen face to face. Part of me wanted to tell him no, to let him stew in his own mess the same way I'd been stewing in mine for years. But there was something in his voice, not anger like Clarissa, not desperation, just exhaustion. Like he'd finally realized how badly he'd screwed up. You know where I live, I said, and gave him my new address. Miles showed up an hour later looking like he'd aged 10 years since morning. His hair was messed up, his tie was crooked, and he had the look of a man who'd just watched his whole world collapse. He sat down heavily in the chair across from me and rubbed his face with both hands. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, not looking up. Tell you what, that I own the house, or that your wife was treating me like garbage. Both. Either. Jesus, Joe, I had no idea you were paying that much rent. Clarissa handles all the household finances. She just told me you were contributing to expenses. $1,900 a month, Miles. For 3 years. Then she wanted to bump it up to $2,300 or kick me out. He winced like I'd slapped him. I didn't know about the increase. She mentioned something about needing more money from you, but I thought she meant like 50 or $100, not 400. And you thought that was okay? Your brother, who you thought was living on Social Security, and you were fine with squeezing him for more money. Miles finally looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Shame. Real, genuine shame. I wasn't thinking, he said quietly. I was so stressed about work, about money, about keeping everything together, that I let Clarissa handle it. I trusted her judgment. Her judgment was to treat me like a tenant instead of family. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry, Joe. But sorry doesn't buy back 3 years of dignity, and it sure as hell doesn't undo an $840,000 real estate deal. 3 days after my conversation with Miles, I was sitting on my small balcony reading the morning paper when I heard a soft knock on my door. It was barely 9 a.m., too early for most visitors, but something about the gentle, hesitant sound told me exactly who was standing on the other side. When I opened the door, there was Talia holding a plate covered with aluminum foil, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying on and off for hours. She was wearing one of those oversized college sweatshirts that made her look even younger than her 20 years, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Hi, Grandpa Joe, she said, her voice small and uncertain. I brought you some cookies. Chocolate chip, the way you like them. My heart just about broke right there. This sweet girl, caught in the middle of a mess that had nothing to do with her, still thinking about making cookies for the old man who'd supposedly turned her world upside down. Come on in, sweetheart, I said, stepping aside and taking the plate from her hands. These smell incredible. She followed me into the little kitchen, looking around at my modest setup with curiosity rather than judgment. The apartment wasn't much. Basic appliances, a small dining table I'd picked up at a thrift store, mismatched dishes that reminded me of my first place after I got married. But it was clean, it was quiet, and it was mine. It's nice, she said, though I could tell she was just being polite. Cozy. It suits me just fine, I replied, unwrapping the cookies and putting a few on a plate. Coffee. I've got the good stuff now. That made her smile a little. Sure. We sat at my small table, and for a few minutes, we just ate cookies and sipped coffee in comfortable silence. Talia kept glancing around the apartment, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She was a smart kid, had been since she was little, and I knew she was trying to piece together things that didn't quite add up. Mom's been crying for 3 days straight, she finally said, breaking the silence. Dad won't talk to anyone. They've been making phone calls about apartments and storage units, and Mom keeps saying things about lawyers and lawsuits, but Dad just tells her to stop. I nodded, but didn't say anything. Let her get it all out. They told me you owned the house all along, she continued, her voice getting stronger. Is that true? It's true. For how long? 17 years. Since before you were born. She absorbed that information, her brow furrowing the way it used to when she was little and trying to work out a math problem. So when we moved in 3 years ago, I was already living in my own house, paying your parents' rent for the privilege. The look on her face shifted from confusion to understanding to something that looked a lot like anger. But not anger at me. Anger at the situation, at her parents, at the unfairness of it all. That's so messed up, she said, shaking her head. I mean, really messed up. You were paying them to live in your own house. $1,900 a month. $1,900. She stopped mid-sentence, her mouth falling open. Are you kidding me? For that tiny room. Your mother thought it was fair market value. Talia laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair market value for what? A closet? God. Grandpa Joe, I pay less than that for my dorm room, and at least there I get meal plans and laundry service. I reached across the table and patted her hand. It's not your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. But I should have known something was wrong, she said, tears starting to well up in her eyes again. I should have stood up for you more when Mom was when she was treating you like what? Like you were this burden we were stuck with instead of family. The tears were flowing freely now. I heard her on the phone with her sister last month, complaining about having to deal with Joe and how you were costing them so much money. I should have said something. You did say something, I reminded her. Every day, just by treating me like a human being. You have no idea how much that meant to me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve, trying to pull herself together. So what happens now? Are Mom and Dad really going to have to move out? The new owners take possession in 2.5 weeks. Your parents need to find somewhere else to live? Yes. And what about me? I mean, I know I'll figure something out, but this is my senior year, and I was hoping to save money by living at home through graduation. This was the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading. The moment when I got to do something good in the middle of all this mess. Talia, I said, leaning forward and looking her straight in the eye. I need to tell you something. Earlier that morning, I'd been thinking about this conversation for days, rehearsing what I'd say and how I'd say it. I mean, I won the lottery 17 years ago. $5 million after taxes. That's how I bought the house. How I've been paying your parents' bills without them knowing. And how I'm going to make sure you finish college without worrying about money. The silence that followed was deafening. Talia just stared at me, her mouth slightly open, like I'd just told her I was secretly a superhero or something equally unbelievable. You won the lottery, she said slowly. I won the lottery. $5 million. $5 million. And you never told anyone? Not even your grandmother. You're the first person I've ever told. She sat back in her chair, shaking her head in amazement. Holy shit, Grandpa Joe. Language, I said with a grin. Sorry, but holy shit. She laughed despite herself. You're rich, and you let my parents charge you rent for 3 years? I wanted to see what kind of people they really were. Turns out, they're the kind of people who would squeeze an old man for every penny they could get. I sat back down and slid a folded piece of paper across the table to her. That's the account number for a trust fund I set up yesterday. There's enough in there to cover your tuition, room, and board, and spending money through graduation. Plus a little extra to help you get started after college. Talia unfolded the paper and looked at the numbers written there. Her eyes went wide again. This says $50,000. It's a start. You were the only one in that house who treated me like family, Talia. The only one who remembered I had feelings and dreams and stories worth hearing. This is my way of saying thank you. She started crying again, but these were different tears. Happy tears. Grateful tears. The kind of tears that come when someone shows you that you matter, that you're valued, that your kindness hasn't gone unnoticed. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Don't say anything to your parents. Not yet. Let them figure out their own mess first. But you don't have to worry about money for school, and you don't have to worry about having a place to stay during breaks. My door is always open for you. She got up and hugged me then, the kind of fierce, grateful hug that reminds you why family is supposed to matter, why it's worth fighting for, even when some people forget what it means. The closing happened on a Tuesday morning that felt more like a celebration than a business transaction. I sat in Raymond's conference room, signing papers and watching my bank account grow by hundreds of thousands of dollars with each stroke of the pen. The buyers, Dr. Sarah Chun and Dr. Michael Rodriguez, were exactly the kind of young professionals who deserved a house like that. They had plans for the place, talked about starting a family, maybe putting in a vegetable garden where Clarissa used to complain about the neighbor's cat digging up her flower beds. After taxes and Raymond's commission, I walked away with just over $760,000. Combined with what I already had saved and invested from the original lottery winnings, I was sitting pretty comfortable. More comfortable than a man my age had any right to expect, and certainly more comfortable than Miles and Clarissa would ever imagine. The funny thing about having real money, not the kind you worry about spending, but the kind that gives you actual choices, is how quiet it makes everything. No more listening to Clarissa count pennies at the grocery store. No more watching Miles stress about overtime hours. No more pretending that $400 extra a month was some kind of financial hardship worth breaking up a family over. I took that money and did something I hadn't done in decades. I bought exactly what I wanted, exactly the way I wanted it. The house I found was perfect in its simplicity. A small ranch-style place in a neighborhood about 20 minutes from where Miles and Clarissa were now renting a cramped two-bedroom apartment. One story, like I dreamed about during all those years of listening to them stomp around upstairs. 3 bedrooms, one for me, one for an office, and one that I kept thinking of as Talia's room, even though she hadn't seen it yet. The kitchen was smaller than the one in my old house, but it was mine. I could cook bacon for breakfast without anyone lecturing me about cholesterol. I could buy the good coffee, the kind that costs $12 a pound and actually tastes like something other than burnt water. I could eat dinner at 9 o'clock at night if I felt like it, or have ice cream for breakfast on a Sunday morning, and there wasn't a soul in the world who could tell me otherwise. But the best part was the garden. Not much to look at when I bought the place. Just a patch of overgrown grass and some volunteer weeds that had taken over what used to be flower beds. But I saw potential there, the same way I'd seen potential in that lottery ticket all those years ago. I spent my first month in the new house getting reacquainted with solitude. Real solitude, not the fake kind where you're surrounded by people who treat you like furniture. I could read the newspaper from front to back without anyone commenting on every article. I could watch whatever I wanted on TV, leave dishes in the sink overnight if I felt like it, take a shower at 2 in the morning if the mood struck me. The silence was incredible. No more Clarissa's heels clicking across hardwood floors at 6 in the morning. No more muffled arguments coming through the walls about money and bills and who was responsible for what. No more walking on eggshells, measuring my words, trying not to be too much of a burden on people who should have been family. I started sleeping better than I had in years. Really sleeping. The kind of deep, peaceful rest that comes when you don't have to worry about someone knocking on your door to make sure you're still breathing. My blood pressure went down, my appetite came back, and I found myself humming old songs while I made breakfast, real breakfast, with eggs and toast, and sometimes even pancakes on the weekend. The first time I went grocery shopping for myself, I stood in the cereal aisle for 20 minutes just looking at all the choices. Sugary cereals, healthy cereals, cereals with nuts and dried fruit. Cereals that probably cost more per box than Clarissa used to spend on a week's worth of her generic oatmeal. I bought 6 different kinds, like a kid let loose in a candy store. But the real freedom came from the phone calls I didn't have to take. Clarissa tried calling me a few times during those first weeks, probably hoping to guilt me into helping them with their security deposit or first month's rent. I let every call go to voicemail, and eventually, she stopped trying. Miles called once, about 3 weeks after the closing. I actually answered that one, curious to hear what he had to say. "We found an apartment," he said without any preamble. 2 bedrooms in that complex near the highway. It's not great, but it's what we can afford right now." "I'm sorry to hear you're having trouble," I replied, though we both knew I wasn't really sorry at all. "Clarissa's working full-time now at the bank, trying to make up for the income we lost when the house situation changed. Good for her. Work builds character." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "Joe, I know things got messed up between us, but we're still family. Maybe we could." "Family," I interrupted. doesn't charge each other rent. Family doesn't threaten to kick each other out over money. Family doesn't treat each other like a burden that needs to be managed. I know. We screwed up. But maybe we could start over. Try to. No, Miles. We can't start over. Some things, once they're broken, they stay broken. I hung up after that, and he didn't call back. The garden started coming together in early spring. I hired a landscaping crew to clear out the weeds and dead plants, then spent my mornings planting tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and flowers. My hands got dirty for the first time in years, and it felt good. Honest. Like I was finally doing something that mattered, something that would grow and flourish without anyone else's permission or approval. Talia visited every couple of weeks, usually bringing takeout from whatever restaurant she was craving. We'd sit on my back patio, eating Chinese food or pizza, talking about her classes and her plans after graduation. She never mentioned her parents unless I asked, and I rarely asked. The house filled up with things I actually wanted instead of things other people thought I should have. Books I'd been meaning to read, a comfortable recliner that didn't squeak, a coffee maker that could brew a perfect cup without anyone complaining about the cost of the beans. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like myself again. I was watering my tomato plants on a humid Thursday afternoon in late June when I heard the car pull into my driveway. The engine had that distinctive whine of Clarissa's Honda, a sound that used to signal the start of another day of walking on eggshells, but now just made me shake my head and wonder what fresh hell she was bringing to my doorstep. I didn't look up right away, just kept tending to my plants like I hadn't heard anything. The tomatoes were coming along beautifully, fat and green, and promising to be the best crop I'd grown in years. Amazing what plants could do when they got proper attention instead of being treated like an afterthought. Through the chain-link fence that separated my backyard from the front of the house, I could see her getting out of the car. She was dressed up more than usual, one of those business casual outfits she wore when she was trying to impress someone at the bank. Hair done, makeup perfect, the whole 9 yards. Like she was heading to a job interview, instead of bothering an old man who'd made it pretty clear he didn't want to see her. She stood at my front gate for a few minutes, probably working up her nerve or rehearsing whatever speech she'd prepared for the occasion. The gate wasn't locked, never saw much point in that, but she didn't just walk up to the door either. Just stood there looking at my house like she was trying to figure out some kind of puzzle. And it was a nice house, I had to admit. Nothing fancy, but well-maintained and comfortable. Single story, like I'd always wanted. Fresh paint, new shutters, and a front porch where I could sit and read the paper without anyone asking me what I was doing or why I wasn't contributing more to the household. Finally, she worked up the courage to walk up my front steps and knock on the door. I took my time answering, partly because I was in no hurry to deal with whatever she wanted, and partly because I wanted her to sweat a little. Let her stand there wondering if I was going to answer at all. When I finally opened the door, she had that fake smile plastered on her face, the same one she used to wear when she was explaining why cold oatmeal was good for my health. "Hi, Joe," she said, like we were old friends running into each other at the grocery store. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd see how you're doing." In the neighborhood, my ass. My new place was 20 minutes from where they were renting, and there was absolutely nothing else around here that would bring Clarissa to this part of town. But I played along. "Clarissa," I said, not moving from the doorway. "This is a surprise." She glanced past me into the house, clearly curious about how I was living these days. "This place is really nice, Joe. You've done well for yourself." "I have indeed." There was an awkward pause while she waited for me to invite her in, and I waited for her to explain what the hell she was doing on my porch. The silence stretched out until it became uncomfortable, but I wasn't about to make this easy for her. "Mind if I come in for a few minutes?" she finally asked. "It's awfully hot out here." It was hot, probably pushing 90 degrees with humidity that made it feel like you were breathing through a wet towel. But the air conditioning in my house was working just fine, and I wasn't particularly interested in sharing it with someone who'd spent 3 years treating me like a second-class citizen. "Actually, I do mind," I said. "If you've got something to say, you can say it right here." Her fake smile flickered for just a second before she got it back under control. "Okay. Well, I guess I just wanted to see how you're settling in. Are you planning to be alone here forever?" There it was. The real reason for her visit wasn't concern for my well-being. It was fishing for information about my living situation, probably hoping to find out that I was lonely or struggling or regretting my decision to leave. Alone is better than being drained every day, I said, looking her straight in the eye. That wiped the smile right off her face. Joe, that's not fair. We were family. We were trying to help you. Help me? By charging me $1,900 a month for a room in my own house. By threatening to kick me out when I couldn't pay even more. You never told us it was your house. You never asked. You just assumed I was some broke old man who should be grateful for your charity. She shifted her weight from one foot to the other, looking uncomfortable but not backing down. Look, I know things got complicated between us, but we're still family. Miles misses you, you know. And Talia asks about you all the time. The mention of Talia hit me right in the chest, but I wasn't about to let Clarissa know that. Talia had been visiting me regularly, and we both knew her parents had no idea about our continued relationship. Bringing her up was a low blow, using my affection for that girl to try to guilt me into some kind of reconciliation. If Miles misses me, he knows where to find me, I said. Same goes for Talia. What if we could work something out? She asked, her voice taking on that wheedling tone she used to use when she wanted me to agree to something that benefited her more than me. What if we could start fresh? Maybe you could help us with the security deposit on a better apartment, and we could all spend holidays together again. Like a real family. A real family. After everything that had happened, she had the balls to stand on my porch and suggest that I bankroll their lifestyle in exchange for the privilege of being treated like a human being. There's no coming back from this, Clarissa, I said. You had 3 years to treat me like family, and instead you treated me like a tenant. A tenant in my own house. Some things can't be undone. But we could try. No, I said firmly. We can't. You made your choice when you decided I was worth $1,900 a month to you. Now you get to live with that choice. I stepped back and put my hand on the door handle, making it clear that this conversation was over. Please, Joe, she said, and for the first time, her voice cracked a little. We're struggling. The apartment is tiny, Talia is having to work extra hours to help with rent, and Miles is talking about taking a second job. We could really use. You could use my money, I finished for her. Just like always. I closed the door in her face and turned the deadbolt. Through the window, I watched her stand there for another minute, probably debating whether to knock again. But eventually, she walked back to her car and drove away. I never saw her again. Clarissa left that afternoon with her gift bag still in her hand and her tail between her legs. I watched her walk back to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement with less confidence than when she'd arrived. She fumbled with her keys for a moment, probably hoping I'd change my mind and call her back, but I just stood there by my gate until she finally drove away. That was 8 months ago. She hasn't been back since. Miles never came at all. I thought he might, eventually. Thought maybe his pride would give way to curiosity, or loneliness, or just the basic human need to know that his older brother didn't hate him completely. But apparently, his embarrassment runs deeper than his regret. Or maybe Clarissa talked him out of it. Either way, my phone stays quiet, and I've stopped expecting it to ring. The funny thing is, I'm not bitter about it anymore. There was a time, right after I moved out, when I'd lie awake at night imagining all the things I should have said to them, all the ways I could have made them understand how much they'd hurt me. But anger is exhausting when you're 72 years old, and I discovered I'd rather spend my energy on things that actually make me happy. Like Talia, who still visits every couple of weeks and has become more of a granddaughter to me than I ever dared hope for. She graduated from college last spring with a business degree and landed a job at a marketing firm downtown. Smart as a whip, that girl, and twice as kind as her parents ever taught her to be. She brings her friends around sometimes. Young people with big dreams and bigger hearts who treat me like I'm somebody worth knowing instead of somebody to be managed. Last weekend, they helped me plan a new section of the garden with herbs and vegetables that I'll probably never be able to eat all of, but that's not really the point. The point is that my home feels alive now. There's laughter in these rooms, real laughter that comes from genuine joy instead of polite obligation. There are conversations that matter, stories that get told and retold, memories being made instead of just time being marked. My days have a rhythm now that suits me perfectly. I wake up when my body tells me to, not when an alarm clock demands it. I make real coffee and eat whatever strikes my fancy for breakfast. Sometimes eggs and bacon, sometimes leftover pizza, sometimes just a bowl of the good cereal that costs too much but tastes like childhood mornings. I spend my mornings in the garden, talking to the tomatoes and arguing with the squirrels who think my bird feeder was installed for their personal benefit. The afternoons are for reading, or napping in my recliner, or calling old friends I'd lost touch with during those years when I was too busy pretending to be grateful for other people's charity. The evenings are the best part, though. That's when I sit on my back porch with a glass of something nice and listen to whatever music fits my mood. Jazz on quiet nights when I want to remember dancing with Teresa in our kitchen. Classic rock when I'm feeling energetic. Sometimes just the sound of the neighborhood settling down for the night. Kids being called in for dinner, dogs barking hello to their owners coming home from work, the gentle hum of air conditioners and lawn mowers, and life happening all around me. The world outside moves fast these days, faster than it did when I was young and thought I had all the time in the world. But I don't try to keep up anymore. I've learned that rushing toward tomorrow just means you miss today, and I've got too many good todays left to waste them worrying about tomorrows that may never come. People talk about winning the lottery like it's the best thing that can happen to a person, and maybe it is if you measure success in dollars and cents. But the real prize isn't the money. It's the freedom to choose who you want to be and how you want. I chose peace. I chose dignity. I chose the kind of family that's built on love instead of obligation, kindness instead of convenience. Sitting here on my porch as the sun sets behind the oak trees I planted last year, listening to Miles Davis play soft and low through my speakers, I can honestly say I've never been richer in my life. And the best part is, nobody can charge me rent for feeling this good about myself. Some prizes are worth more than money. Some victories taste sweeter than revenge. And some days, when everything is quiet and right with the world, you realize you've won more than any lottery could ever give you. You've won your freedom. And that, as they say, is priceless. Clarissa left that afternoon with her gift bag still in her hand and her tail between her legs. I watched her walk back to her car, her heels clicking against the pavement with less confidence than when she'd arrived. She fumbled with her keys for a moment, probably hoping I'd change my mind and call her back, but I just stood there by my gate until she finally drove away. That was 8 months ago. She hasn't been back since. Miles never came at all. I thought he might, eventually. Thought maybe his pride would give way to curiosity, or loneliness, or just the basic human need to know that his older brother didn't hate him completely. But apparently, his embarrassment runs deeper than his regret. Or maybe Clarissa talked him out of it. Either way, my phone stays quiet, and I've stopped expecting it to ring. The funny thing is, I'm not bitter about it anymore. There was a time, right after I moved out, when I'd lie awake at night imagining all the things I should have said to them, all the ways I could have made them understand how much they'd hurt me. But anger is exhausting when you're 72 years old, and I discovered I'd rather spend my energy on things that actually make me happy. Like Talia, who still visits every couple of weeks and has become more of a granddaughter to me than I ever dared hope for. She graduated from college last spring with a business degree and landed a job at a marketing firm downtown. Smart as a whip, that girl, and twice as kind as her parents ever taught her to be. She brings her friends around sometimes, young people with big dreams and bigger hearts who treat me like I'm somebody worth knowing instead of somebody to be managed. Last weekend, they helped me plan a new section of the garden with herbs and vegetables that I'll probably never be able to eat all of, but that's not really the point. The point is that my home feels alive now. There's laughter in these rooms, real laughter that comes from genuine joy instead of polite obligation. There are conversations that matter, stories that get told and retold, memories being made instead of just time being marked. My days have a rhythm now that suits me perfectly. I wake up when my body tells me to, not when an alarm clock demands it. I make real coffee and eat whatever strikes my fancy for breakfast. Sometimes eggs and bacon, sometimes leftover pizza, sometimes just a bowl of the good cereal that costs too much but tastes like childhood mornings. I spend my mornings in the garden, talking to the tomatoes and arguing with the squirrels who think my bird feeder was installed for their personal benefit. The afternoons are for reading, or napping in my recliner, or calling old friends I'd lost touch with during those years when I was too busy pretending to be grateful for other people's charity. The evenings are the best part, though. That's when I sit on my back porch with a glass of something nice and listen to whatever music fits my mood. Jazz on quiet nights when I want to remember dancing with Teresa in our kitchen. Classic rock when I'm feeling energetic. Sometimes just the sound of the neighborhood settling down for the night. Kids being called in for dinner, dogs barking hello to their owners coming home from work, the gentle hum of air conditioners and lawn mowers, and life happening all around me. The world outside moves fast these days, faster than it did when I was young and thought I had all the time in the world. But I don't try to keep up anymore. I've learned that rushing toward tomorrow just means you miss today, and I've got too many good todays left to waste them worrying about tomorrows that may never come. People talk about winning the lottery like it's the best thing that can happen to a person, and maybe it is if you measure success in dollars and cents. But the real prize isn't the money. It's the freedom to choose who you want to be and how you want to spend whatever time you have left. I chose peace. I chose dignity. I chose the kind of family that's built on love instead of obligation, kindness instead of convenience. Sitting here on my porch as the sun sets behind the oak trees I planted last year, listening to Miles Davis play soft and low through my speakers, I can honestly say I've never been richer in my life. And the best part is, nobody can charge me rent for feeling this good about myself. Some prizes are worth more than money. Some victories taste sweeter than revenge. And some days, when everything is quiet and right with the world, you realize you've won more than any lottery could ever give you. You've won your freedom. And that, as they say, is priceless.